Part 7 of Ultima Thule. This librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Karen Savage. Ultima Thule by Mack Reynolds. Part 7. Even on the fast Space Force's cruiser, the trip was going to take a week, and there was precious little Ronny Bronston could do until arrival. He spent most of his time reading up on New Delos and the several other planets in the UP organization which had fairly similar regimes. More than a few theocracies had come and gone during the history of man's development into the stars. He also spent considerable time playing battle chess or talking with Tog and with the ship's officers. These latter were a dedicated group, high in morale, enthusiastic about their work, which evidently involved the combined duties of a navy, a coast guard, and a coast and geodetic survey system, if we use the ocean-going services of an earlier age for analogy. They all had the dream, the enthusiasm of men participating in a race's expansion to glory. There was the feeling, even stronger here in space than back on Earth, of man's destiny being fulfilled, that humanity had finally emerged from its infancy, that the fledgling had finally found its wings and got off the ground. After one of his studying binges, Ronny Bronston had spent an hour or so once with the captain of the craft, while that officer stood an easy watch on the ship's bridge. There was little enough to do in space, practically nothing, but there was always an officer on watch. They leaned back in the acceleration chairs before the ship's controls, and Ronny listened to the other's space lore. Stories of far-off planets as yet untouched. Stories of planets that had seemingly been suitable for colonization, but had proved disastrous for man for this reason or that. Ronny said, "And never in all this time have we run into a life form that has proved intelligent?" Captain Voysky said, "No, not that I know of. There was an animal on Shangri-La about the mental level of the chimpanzee. So far as I know, that's the nearest to it." "Shangri-La?" Ronny said. "That's a new one." There was an affectionate gleam in the captain's eye. "Yes," he said. "If and when I retire, I think that'd be the planet of my choice, if I could get permission to leave Earth, of course." Ronny scowled in attempted memory. "Now that you mention it, I think I did see it listed the other day among planets with a theocratic government." The captain grunted protest. "If you're comparing it to this new Delos you're going to, you're wrong. There can be theocracy and theocracy, I suppose. Actually, I imagine Shangri-La has the most, well, gentle government in the system." Ronny was interested. His recent studies hadn't led him to much respect for a priesthood in political power. "What's the particular feature that seemed to have gained your regard?" "Moderation," Voysky chuckled. "They carry it almost to the point of immoderation, but not quite. Briefly, it works something like this. They have a limited number of monks, I suppose you'd call them, who spend their time at whatever moves them, at the arts, at scientific research, at religious contemplation, any religion will do, as students of anything and everything, and at the governing of Shangri-La. They make a point of enjoying the luxuries in moderation, and aren't a severe drain on the rank-and-file citizens of the planet." Ronny said, "I have a growing distrust of hierarchies. Who decides who is to become a monk and who remain a member of the rank-and-file?" The captain said, "A series of the best tests they can devise to determine a person's intelligence and aptitudes. From earliest youth, the whole populace is checked and rechecked. At the age of 30, when it is considered that a person has become adult and has finished his basic education, a limited number are offered monkhood. Not all wanted." Ronny thought about it. "Why not? What are the shortcomings?" The captain shrugged. "Responsibility, I suppose." "The monks aren't allowed sex, booze, that sort of thing, I imagine?" "Good heavens, why not? In moderation, of course." "And they live on a higher scale?" No, not at all. Don't misunderstand. The planet is a prosperous one, exceedingly prosperous. There is everything needed for comfortable existence for everyone. Shangri-La is one planet where the pursuit of happiness is pursuable by all." Captain Voysky chuckled again. Ronny said, "It sounds good enough, although I'm leery of benevolent dictatorships. The trouble with them is that it's up to the dictators to decide what's benevolent, and almost always nepotism rears its head, favoritism of one sort or another. How long will it be before one of your moderate monks decides he'll moderately tinker with the tests or whatever, just to be sure his favorite nephew makes the grade? A high IQ is no guarantee of integrity." The captain didn't disagree.
That's always possible, I suppose. One guard against it in this case is the matter of motive. The privilege of being a monk isn't as great as all that. Materially, you aren't particularly better off than anyone else. You have more leisure, that's true, but actually most of them are so caught up in their studies or research that they put in more hours of endeavor than does the farmer or industrial worker on Shangri-La.
Well, Ronny said, let's just hope that Tommy Paine never hears of this place.
Who?
The captain said. Ronny Bronston reversed his engines. Oh, nobody important. A guy I know of. Captain Voysky scowled.
Seems to me I've heard the name.
At first, Ronny leaned forward with quick interest. Perhaps the cruiser's skipper had a lead. But no, he sank back into his chair. That name was strictly a Section G pseudonym. No one used it outside the department, and he'd already said too much by using the term at all. Ronny said idly, probably two different people. I think I'll go on back and see how Tog is doing. Tog was at her communicator when he entered the tiny ship's lounge. Ronny could see in the brilliant little screen of the compact device the grinning face of Sid Jakes. Tog looked up at Ronny and smiled, then clicked the device off. What's new? Ronny said. She moved graceful shoulders. I just called Supervisor Jakes. Evidently there's complete confusion on New Delos. Mobs are storming the temples. In the capital, the priests tried to present a new god king, and he was laughed out of town. Ronny snorted cynically. Sounds good to me. The more I read about New Delos and its god king and his priesthood, the more I think the best thing that ever happened to the planet was this showing them up. Tog looked at him, the sides of her mouth tucking down as usual when she was going to contradict something he said. It sounds bad to me, she said. Tommy Paine's work is done. He'll be off to some other place, and we won't get there in time to snare him. Ronny considered that. It was probably true. I wonder, he said slowly, if it's possible for us to get a list of all ships that have blasted off since the assassination, all ships and their destination from New Delos. The idea grew in him. Look, it's possible that a dictatorial government such as theirs would immediately quarantine every spaceport on the planet. Tog said, there's only one spaceport on New Delos. The priesthood didn't encourage trade or even communication with the outside, didn't want its people contaminated. Holy smokes, Ronny blurted. It's possible that Tommy Paine's on that planet and can't get off. Look, Tog, see if you can raise the Section G representative on New Delos and... Tog said demurely, I already have taken that step, Ronny, knowing that you'd want me to. Agent Mouli Hassan has promised to get the name and destination of every passenger that leaves New Delos. Ronny sat down at a table and dialed himself a mug of stout. Drink? He said to Tog. Possibly we've got something to celebrate. She shook her head disapprovingly. I don't use depressants. There was nothing more to be discussed about New Delos. They simply would have to wait until their arrival. Ronny switched subjects. Ever hear of the planet Shangri-La? He asked her. He took a sip of his brew. Of course, she said. A rather small planet, Earth-type within 4 degrees, noted for its near-perfect climate and its scenic beauty. Captain was talking about it, Ronny said. Sounds like a regular paradise. Tog made a negative sound. Well, what's wrong with Shangri-La? Ronny said impatiently. Static, she said briefly. He looked at her. It sounds to me as though it's developed a near-perfect socioeconomic system. What do you mean, static? No push, no drive, Tog said definitely. Everyone, what is the old term? Everyone has it made. The place is stagnating. I wouldn't be surprised to see Tommy Paine show up there sooner or later. Ronny said, Look, since we've known each other, have I ever said anything you agree with? Tog raised her delicate eyebrows. Why, Ronny, you know perfectly well we both agreed that the eggs for breakfast were quite inedible. Ronny came to his feet again. Considering her size, she certainly was an irritating baggage. I think I'll go to my room and see if I can get any inspirations on tracking down our quarry. Good night, Ronny, she said demurely. End of Part 7.